Hello, my name's Alex Lee from Microsoft Sila. I'm here to talk with you about a new international standard called ISO IEC 19086-1. It is a cloud agreement standard to be used by cloud customers to help them think through their requirements and what should be included in their cloud agreements with cloud providers. ISO IEC 19086-1 is not the usual cloud certification standard that you might be familiar with, such as 27018 for privacy. It is not applicable to products or services per se. Instead, it is mainly designed for cloud customers' internal cloud strategic planning purposes, and there's no certification process. What it does is to help identify a common set of elements for cloud customers to think through in their requirement planning and agreement setting. In some cases, some of these elements may not be applicable for all projects, or they may apply differently. For example, the minimum uptime requirement may differ from projects to projects, while the regulatory requirements should be quite consistent from project to projects regardless. So this standard basically outlines all of them for our customers. So one natural question that you may ask is, well, if our customers ask us a lot of diligence questions and what have you, wouldn't that slow down the deal? And that's a very, very logical question. Let me tell you about a scenario that some of you might be quite familiar with. Oftentimes, what we have is an operation department, I'll say maybe the HR department or the sales department. They want to move to the cloud and they work with perhaps the CIO office to figure out what the product features and requirements are and how much they're willing to spend and a bunch of other things. But at the 11th hour, the gatekeepers come back, such as the corporate councils and risk management people, and they tell them, hey, you have not dot all the I's and cross all the T's. You need to go back to square one. Does that sound familiar? Oftentimes that even happens after the deal's been closed, and that might explain why there's no consumption in some of our customers' end. So what we're really trying to propose here is to help address those concerns of the gatekeepers upfront. My contention is that they don't really want to be the one to say no to their colleagues from moving to the cloud. What they're really trying to do is to protect the interests of the organization. And if we can address their concerns upfront, then more cloud projects will get off the ground. Projects planning will be much more predictable and consumption will go up. In the long run, this is better for cloud customers and provider. It makes the sales motion more predictable and our customers more confident as they move to the cloud. So here's what we're doing to help our customers consume the standard. Instead of requiring them to read 40 plus pages of document written in some esoteric language, we basically boil down the standard into a simple checklist. The checklist will be made available on the Microsoft Trust Center. A link will be provided at the end of this presentation so that you can download it at ease. And we encourage our customers who intend to use the standard to actually go to ISO and get the standard and read it in full so they are fully understanding what they're consuming. And here we are. This is a checklist. We're starting with a little intro up front, which I won't go into detail because I assume all of you can read it offline on your own. Here we are starting to get into the part of the checklist itself, and it is really 4 pages long with some graphics, so it's not that bad. So what I'll do is I'll just try to break it down into two main categories. First are the service quality objectives. Now, what are service quality objectives? These are things that you can't really measure. So a good example would be what will be the requirements vis-a-vis data location for our customers. So this is something that is a quantitative requirement as to what the provider needs to do for the customers. And then there are things that are more quantitatively measurable. These are called service level objectives, and more commonly found will be things like response times, elasticity, capacity, and availability. These are all measurable items. You can probably use a unit to measure, and availability, of course, is just percentage. So these are the type of breakdown of the checklist. And I encourage you to download it and review it because we won't have time to go through it all. So this is a breakdown of what we intend our customers to really do with the checklist in the first place. Once they have the checklist, what we really think is logical for them to do is the customer needs to define at the organization level what are the requirements. Some of the requirements will be driven externally, such as industry or regulatory sources. Some will be from the inside. So I'll give you an example. PII, how cloud providers handle the PII. That would, in large part, be driven by external requirements such as privacy regulations. But on the other hand, organizations may have a slightly more stringent requirement than what the law requires them to do. Another area that's commonly thought about and important would be something like law enforcement access to the data. These are requirements that the organization level probably need to think through. And then next day, you have the project definition, where our customers need to think through the more technical requirements, such as uptime, and also other things such as particular service features and level of support that they really want, and the cost constraint, of course. And lastly, once you've done those two steps prior, then you can go into the project design, project assessment, and RFP. We won't dive into all that in details, but I'll spend a little bit more time talking about step one and step two. So this is step one. This is how we envision our customers to use the checklist. First, you convert the checklist and put it in the spreadsheet. So we only put in the first item of the checklist, which is accessibility in here, but you fill it up into all the rows on the spreadsheet. And then on the next column is where you define the external requirement. You get this from the industry source, regulatory source, and also depending on where you customer operates. And then the column 3 is where you put the organization's specific requirements. Like I mentioned earlier, you might have some regulatory requirements on how to handle personally identifiable information, but at the organization level, you might require something a little bit more, or you have something to spell out in terms of what you expect the providers to do in case of law enforcement requests for access for information. And once you put together column 2 and column 3 here, then you combine them, you basically have the organization cloud policy as to what you require out of the providers in all time. Of course, some of these checklist items won't be applicable. So for example, the more technical stuff like the uptime, availability, sort of requirements are far more project specific, and at the organization level, they would not define such requirements. And then column 5 is really a weight. I think in the organization level, it is logical to assign a certain weight. Here we just toss in a number, 4 out of 10 in a scale of 10 into a particular requirements. Of course, this is not what we expect our customers to use. We don't mean that it's 4 out of 10 for accessibility. It's just an example in terms of what to use here. Next is really the project definitions stage. Here in column 6, that's where you put in the specific requirements for the projects. This is also where you add some additional rows regarding cost and also feature requirements. And if you combine the requirement from 6 with the previous requirement, which is the organizational level requirement, this is when you're going to start looking into if there's any reconciliation you need to make. It's possible that the organization level have not thought through some of the issues that's more specific to the project. It's also possible that the project might require to push some boundary that is previously set in the organization level, in which case the internal stakeholders need to negotiate and reconcile and figure out the right answer for the organization and for the specific project. And then in column 8, that's where you assign the weight. And of course, the weight will be new assignment for things that are more technical specifically to the project. Last, in column 9, that's where you do the ownership assignment. So I'll go back to an example of accessibility. When accessibility, for example, in a case of something like Office 365, where the cloud providers essentially dictates the level of accessibility of the project. In that case, it's 100% on the provider. On the other hand, maybe our customers are actually using Azure to build an app on their own, in which case Azure can only be responsible for the accessibility of the tools that we provide to our customers. But the app that they end up making, how accessible it is entirely on our customer's shoulder. So of course, in real life, it could be many different parties. It could be a system integrator involved. It could be a customers. It could be a provider. But this is where you start to think through who's responsible for what. And once you know that, then the last step of the process, which is step 3 at the project assessment and RFP level. This is where you're going to start thinking about comparing different providers and comparing different options in terms of performance. This is something that we expect our customers to be able to handle, and which is a normal process. So here we are. We have some resource where you can get more information. Of course, we cannot cover everything in 15 minutes, but what we have here is a bunch of lists. Please go to Microsoft Trust Center to download this. So please contact us if you have any question. My name is Alex Lee from CELA. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.